So welcome to episode 1 of the Right Brain Insights podcast. We're here in Melbourne, Australia at the offices of Hamilton Murphy. I'm sitting down today with Stephen Dixon, one of the owners of Hamilton Murphy. Hamilton Murphy is a liquidation, administration, business insolvency practice, specialising in small to medium businesses here in Australia. They have offices right around the country, and I'm talking to Stephen because of his extensive experience in dealing with people and business owners when they are going through financially stressful situations and navigating that outcome for the best of everybody involved. I hope the discussion today is able to show people that there are options out there if things are bad, and there are people you can speak to. At RBI, we've been working with Stephen and his team for approximately 10 years. We've seen them pull off some amazing projects, and looking forward to talking to Stephen more about his world. Stephen Dixon.
David.
Welcome.
Thank you. Very kind.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure. Thank you so much for making the time to do this. It's
I really appreciate it.
The first one. The inaugural episode of the Right Brain Insights podcast. So I kind of don't know what I'm doing, but we'll figure it out.
That makes two of us, so
yeah,
it's
okay.
okay.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. But something I did want to do was I really want to. It's just how Mum raised me.
Okay.
So we wanted to make sure that every guest gets a little gift at the start.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
So this is just.
Oh, thank you.
It's actually out of a company from a company in America. They're little hydrolyte packs. So as you like traveling or whatnot, you can.
Thank you.
It's full of all the best stuff. It's a company called Jocko Fuel, but really, really clean stuff, vitamins, electrolytes, all that sort of stuff.
Well, you know I do a lot of travel, so
hell
come in very handy.
Yeah. But keep those on, yeah?
Thank you. Oh, it's very kind of you, but thank you very much.
Yeah. So, mate, thanks for making the time. Obviously, you and I have worked a long time together.
Long time. Yeah, great.
Yeah. And now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but your background, Stephen, so you're one of the owners of Hamilton Murphy, one of the main liquidation and administration companies here in Australia, and you guys look after So you guys look after business and personal insolvency events. Yeah, cool. So now you've got offices right around Australia as well?
Yep. Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth. Yes.
Awesome. How big's the team in Hamilton?
We're up to 43 people.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. And you're working across all kinds of industries.
Correct. Yeah, you name it, we get involved with it.
Yeah.
So we don't specialise in any one industry. Obviously, it's all based on referrals, as you know, from people like yourself, accountants, lawyers. So we really don't know on a day-to-day basis of what industry we'll be dealing with next.
Yeah, perfect.
Which is what I love about it.
Yeah. Well, on that, let's going back a bit. How did you get into this? As of all the things you could possibly do, growing up in the world, all the things you could possibly do, you landed in this, and you've been doing it for a while. So what got you into it, and what keeps you in it? Okay,
I'll give you the abridged version of how I got into it. So I finished my degree in the late 80s. There was no work in Australia, so I actually travelled to the UK. I drove around the UK for about 2 weeks. I ran out of money, to be very honest about it. I then got a job as a temporary accountant for a large architectural firm in the UK. So I went in there on a 2-week assignment. Within a week, I'd found that they had been defrauded by the CFO, rebuilt the balance sheet and P&L, discovered they'd lost £800,000 the year before. We owed their version of the tax office a sizable sum of money. So based on those couple of metrics, we then had to go and renegotiate with the bank over there, with the general manager. We reduced the staff by 30. And that's as a very junior accountant that I experienced, what you'd call as insolvency and reconstruction.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, my father got sick, so I had to come back to Australia. When I arrived, I saw an advert in the old days, advert for a job.
Back in the day.
In the decade, with Pitcher Partners. And they would only give me the job in their insolvency group if I started as a grad, even though I had 5 years experience.
Yeah, awesome.
So I had to start as a grad at Pitcher Partners in their insolvency group, based on the experience I had in the UK.
Yeah.
And that was how I've landed in it. Prior to that, I'd actually worked in audit for 3 years for another firm, but that's how I actually landed in insolvency and reconstruction.
Yeah, right. And growing up, did you know, like while you were going through high school, for instance, that you wanted to get into financial services?
No, I actually wanted to be an Air Force pilot. I failed Year 11 physics, if you
Yeah.
want the truth.
Yeah.
That was the end of that career.
Yeah.
I was
That'll do it. Yeah.
then I was offered a position in the army to go
Yep.
to ADVA. And for some reason, literally just before that, I knocked that back and then went to uni.
What made you knock back the ADVA thing?
Uh, the, I think it was probably to be honest, the fear of leaving my family in Melbourne
Yeah.
and moving to Canberra.
How old were you at that point?
I was 18.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
and obviously to a degree, probably had a sheltered upbringing to a degree, as you could well appreciate.
Yeah. Oh, likewise. Like I did boot camp at 22.
Yeah.
Same thing. No idea.
No, I didn't have a clue, right?
At 18, it would have
Yeah.
boot camp at 18 when I was 18 would have scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, so I made the decision of then obviously got a placement offer to go to Swinburne,
Yeah, cool.
and that's where I started my undergraduate.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What was uni like in the 80s?
Well, I actually worked full time and studied part time, so I didn't experience the full
Yeah, right.
full time university experience. However, I did go and finish my last year full time, but at that point in time, I was actually already a father to a little girl. So that experience also, and so I had to work part time, study full time, and bring up my daughter, which I did solely for a period of time.
Wow.
So yeah, I didn't get the full on uni experience.
Yeah. You got
I don't
a
regret
very
it.
different experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So something we've worked together for just on that, like how did growing up so early, going through university the way that you did part-time with a young child, how did that impact you?
That's a very good question. I probably let myself down at times. I probably wasn't as focused as I should have been.
Well, there's competing focuses.
Well, the competing focuses and probably had to deal with a few issues because of the fact that I was a single dad at that point in time.
Yeah.
And as I said, I probably didn't handle it particularly well at times in hindsight. But then I got myself going again. If you really want the truth, which is completely true, I actually nearly got kicked out of uni. I failed a whole year. So I had to turn myself around and I did that.
Yep.
And then I finished my degree and really embraced my last year of uni.
Yep.
And got something out of it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, because the reason I ask is like something that has struck me in working with yourself, because we've been working together for nearly a decade. I was thinking about the very first client was that.
Yep.
Yeah, those guys out of Birmingham when I first met you. That was an interesting case. But one of the things that struck me and has struck me in working with you and also the larger Hamilton Murphy team has been like the way I would describe it is the way I've seen you in particular inject, it's like a morality into very complex, very emotional situations where people are either scared, angry.
Yep.
Like it's wild. There's people are meeting you. They're usually not having a good day.
No, they're not. Generally, they're not.
Yeah. And I find that really interesting. That seems to be something so different about your approach compared to other liquidators that I've dealt with, where they might be very black and white, or it's a shame to say, sort of, at least in my experience, in your industry, almost a little bit dirty.
Yeah, look, there's obviously different personalities in every industry,
Totally.
not just my industry and your industry, every industry. Look, the other experience I've had, and I can't remember if I've ever told you this historically, my father had a printing business. Unfortunately, I had to shut it down and we had to actually put it into liquidation. So I experienced firsthand the impact on a director because that was actually my father.
How old were you when that
I
happened?
was working at Pitcher Partners at that
Okay.
point in time.
Yeah.
And I saw the impact on my mother.
Mm.
Um, Particularly I've got a younger sister, so it impacted her because she was still at home at that point in time. But really, the impact it had on Dad,
Yeah.
right, and also how it affected the way his self-belief, right, and through that process, it made me realise that people deserve respect,
Mm.
right? And I wanted my father to dealt with respectfully. It wasn't his fault that the company went. Like, when I say it wasn't his fault, you've got to take responsibility as director. We all do. Okay.
Yeah.
However, technology changed in the printing industry, and unfortunately, his business did
Yeah.
not.
Rapidly.
It changed rapidly, and
Yeah.
his business just couldn't keep up with it. Didn't have the working capital, didn't have the financing available to it to keep up with technology. And the other thing that went wrong is they purchased a piece of plant, a 5-color press. It was never installed properly. It was faulty. It never generated the revenue, and ultimately the company was unprofitable.
Yeah.
So we had to shut it down. And I watched firsthand the physical and emotional impact on him, and that has always resonated with me, and therefore that's made me determined on how I was going to treat people going
Mm.
forward. Because because of the direct impact on Dad.
Yeah. Is that something you look for when you're trying to hire people into Hamilton Murphy as
Oh,
well?
100%. You've got to be empathetic, right?
Yeah.
Hey, and look, everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Everyone has history, as you've just heard some of mine.
Mm.
So therefore, you need people that are willing to listen. You need people that are going to be empathetic, right? You don't want people that are just going to brush people off and not be respectful of their background and
Mm.
where they come from and what they've been through, because you just don't know.
Yeah. On that though,
Hmm.
how how in your experience have you managed, because I've seen you do this in ways that have been mind-blowing to me.
Very
How
kind.
have you been able to remain detached when you've got, just the matters that we've
Yep.
been across? Like you've got two competing directors going at each other.
Yeah.
One's threatening to sue you. The other, like you've got
Yeah.
people screaming at the
Mm.
down the phone. I've had clients having people that they owe
Yeah.
money. They're showing up now,
They do.
threatening violence at their
Yeah.
premises. Like your world, you would come across some insane emotional reactions
Oh, yeah. Been
and
a party
just
to it.
rational and
Yeah.
irrational. Like,
Yeah.
how do you and your team like not only deal with that to get the best outcome
Hmm.
for the clients and the creditors, but also remain detached so that it seems like it doesn't. It almost seems like it doesn't affect you,
I
but I imagine it
It
does.
does.
And
No, it definitely impacts me, right? Yeah,
yeah,
probably the thing is you don't see me late at night
mm,
or 3:30 in the morning when I can't sleep because yeah, you do. There is some emotional attachment because you want the business to succeed.
yeah,
You want, you want to be able to reconstruct it. You
yeah,
want people to keep their jobs. I hate having to absolutely despise making people redundant. It breaks my heart every time I have to do it. Now, I've done it more times than I care to imagine, but it's never comfortable,
mm,
never comfortable. But ultimately, what I'm trying to achieve is to as you would know, reconstruct the business. So it's something positive comes out the other end. The way I look at it is I've got to have a positive impact.
mm.
Now, yeah, does it affect me
Or
occasionally?
the least bad.
Yeah, that's right. The
Sometimes,
least bad,
sometimes,
that's right.
because I know we've dealt with matters where
Yep.
there is no good outcome.
No,
This
I
is about,
agree.
okay, what's the
Yep.
least? What's the least?
Shit, exactly
Yeah,
right. And yeah, and look, it does impact me sometimes.
yeah,
But then on the other hand, I've got some hobbies. I've obviously got some beautiful kids and some great friends. So therefore, I can get away from things
yeah.
at
You got the
times.
tools there to
You
keep
got the
keep you
tools,
balanced.
and very lucky. I've got some, very lucky that I've had a lot of support. People like yourself, you know, um, you can then have that conversation,
Mm,
right? And you don't judge me if based on that conversation,
mm.
you know.
Is that something that you try to instill in the team
Oh,
here at
100%.
Hamilton Murphy, particularly
Yeah.
with young people coming through?
Yep.
Hey, like prep yourself for this.
Yeah, it's very
You know.
yeah, it's very difficult. Like a lot of what we do is emotional intelligence.
Mm,
It's dealing with people. It's not dealing with the numbers. I probably only deal with numbers, say 5, 10% of the day.
yeah,
It's actually just dealing with people and the situation and the commercial reality of what's going on and doing commercial deals rather than actually the black and white reading a balance sheet or interpreting the profit and loss. 90% of what I do is actually all people driven.
mm, mm,
So you've got to understand the psychology of people. Now, I haven't done a psychology degree or anything like that, but I've just been very lucky. I've learned it along the way, and I've had some very good mentors on the way through. A couple of partners from Pitcher Partners who I owe indebted to personally,
mm.
who have taught me a lot along the way through, and a couple of people that here at the moment that Lee and a few other people have been actors, mentors to me, and that also helped me just maintain what I'll say is a normal level, so to speak.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And a glass of red wine helps occasionally too.
Yeah, every now and then. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But speaking of which, like, what are some of the more memorable matters that you would have dealt with over
um,
your career, and,
Look,
why? What comes to mind?
there's probably a lot of matters, but there's a couple that I am particularly proud of. Um, I think you and I have spoken about this one, the bridge builder that we've just helped out, was involved with the Westgate Tunnel project. We basically reconstructed that company. It's now extremely profitable. The director was an awesome engineer, absolutely amazing engineer, but obviously hadn't had that financial experience and hadn't had that financial education. So as part of the process, it wasn't just fixing the balance sheet, but it was also educating him on interpreting numbers and understand the costings and
Mm,
you know and so it's rewarding from two areas, not only see the director also develop but also resurrecting the company.
mm,
The other one we've just finished it in the last 6 months that I'm extremely proud of because I learned a lot. I have just finished working with an Indigenous organisation.
mm.
Okay, now as you can well appreciate, my background. English background. I didn't understand the Indigenous culture as well I might have. I learned a lot from the director and
Yeah.
being around him, and I really appreciate the experience. Once again, this this director should be so proud of himself, right? So he's developed this Indigenous mining services business up in the northwest of Australia.
Hmm.
He had a major, and still has a major contract with a major mining firm. When I say a major mining firm, one of the two largest
Yeah.
mining firms
One of the
in
big
Australia,
boys.
one of the big
Yeah.
boys, right? So he went from up in the Pilbara to being on St George's Terrace in their office dealing with them, right?
Mm,
It's an incredible story, right? And again, yes, he had some financial difficulties. Very proud of the fact that now we've reconstructed it. It's gone through a deeded company arrangement. He's now buying new equipment. He's got all the admin structure. He's got the accounting structure. He's got all the structures in play that he needs, and he will be highly successful. I have no doubt about it. In fact, he's
mm,
already successful. He will grow and be even more successful than what he's been today.
mm,
But again, it wasn't just a financial element. I learned something from a cultural viewpoint. I've
mm,
grown as an individual by working with the director, right? He's taught me a lot. And he's invited me actually to come up and he's going to take me out bush in the next couple of months, right? And I'm going to take my 19-year-old son with me so both of us can have that experience. And that wouldn't have occurred if I wasn't sitting doing insolvency and
yeah.
reconstruction work.
Fantastic. Yeah.
It's an awesome
Yeah. Yeah.
opportunity,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I can't wait.
Yeah.
Now I'm completely naive to what I'm going to experience, but I don't
Yeah.
care.
It's all right.
It's part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can't wait. But I'm really honoured that he's asked me to come up
That's
and
fantastic.
go out into the bush, as
Yeah.
he describes it with him.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
No, that's fantastic. And I agree. Like, I really agree with some of that because even just on the clients that we've dealt with together, almost always,
Hmm.
where in my line of work, I've come across a business that might be struggling.
Yep.
there is a fear about that failure.
Yep. Okay.
A fear that maybe they're going to lose their house, or they're going to be a failure, or the business is going to. There's a whole heap of stuff that goes on from that. But then usually once they meet with you and the team, and we kind of war game it out and actually understand the options and the implications and what can be done, it's actually quite liberating.
It's very liberating. Look at the one you and I continue to work on, that maintenance services business. We met with the director. He's got your confidence. You continue to consult with him. I've done my bit, so to speak. So I've cleaned up the balance sheet. But now working with you, you're holding him to account with his overhead structure, his costings. So he's got that additional support that I certainly can't provide.
Yeah, and it's funny, like I think we're catching up with him next week.
Next week.
They've made more money in 2 months.
Exactly.
After the administration, they've made more money in 2 months than they did in the previous 3 years combined.
Yeah, which is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But it's awesome because it means you and I have done our jobs.
Yeah, well, if they can learn that, and
Correct.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, like there is a beauty if it's done right, if it's done for the right reasons, and that's a big part on the business owner as well.
I agree.
Right? Because there are those out there, there are business owners out there that'll deliberately rack up their debts, try and use the process to.
100%.
Absolutely, that happens. But it's like if you've made mistakes, it's almost like the law allows for you to.
It does to a degree.
Yeah, you do. Like you actually are allowed to fail. Yep, it's okay.
It's like anything in life, right? People can use the law or the legislation to their advantage if they want to. It's like there's numerous pieces of legislation where you can, but again, with for example, like he's willing to listen, he's willing to learn, he wants to learn. Yeah, that's half of it with the directors. They want to learn. They want to improve themselves.
The battle. Yeah, now it's just about time.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and what the options are there. Yeah, because if you can learn that, then the compound effect of that is huge because you never end up, well, you shouldn't. If you can learn it, then all of a sudden you should not end up in the position again.
Correct. I agree.
Or you're going to go out there and make new mistakes.
Yeah, and the next stage with his business, as you know, will be doing the succession. And you and I, particularly Bobby, no, I should take no credit for this. You are working already with the person that's going to be taking over the business as part of the succession planning process. So your role is one of educating.
You're passing that on to the next generation.
To the next generation.
Yeah.
Which is extremely important. So the business will continue into the future. It's not reliant on staying within the business. He can retire out and enjoy some of the fruits of his labour, so to speak. And that's where, again, your role is to educate the next generation.
Yeah, and they've been able to steer that ship now in a different direction, which is really, really cool to see.
It's incredible. It's awesome.
Yeah. And on that, like along that line, there are many reasons for this, but in your experience, why do so many businesses fail?
Well, a number of reasons. The obvious ones are probably undercapitalized to start with.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Basically, the business has started with not the right financing structure. So it never started with the adequate amount of working capital to help it grow. Therefore,
you underestimated how much money you need in your war chest for you to be effective in the business.
Correct. Exactly right. Yeah. And therefore, as soon as that occurs, you use creditors' money, for want of a better word. You don't pay your creditors. You use then that for your working capital.
Push your suppliers
push everything out.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And the growth may not occur as quickly as you've expected. Or on the other hand, the growth does occur and then you haven't got enough working capital to allow for the growth. So that
now you're in this vicious cycle.
And then a cycle.
Yeah. And so riffing on that, like that's something I see from my world and what we do in working with guys, in that industrial manufacturing trade service sector who've started a business off the back of their own trade. The thing I see all the time is these guys are experts at what they do. They're the bridge builder.
That's the other
They're
thing.
the high pressure. They know that to a T. But often, like my old man, he ran his own plumbing business, never finished high school, didn't make him stupid, but he was never trained. And to start your own company, you don't have to be trained in finance at all. They don't test you, no nothing, right? So all of a sudden, they're going out there doing their thing. They care about it. they're good at it and they got
Right.
the work ethic, so they grow. But then all of a sudden they're focused probably on the revenue at best,
Yep.
and then they're just not across the rest of the financials.
No,
So
right.
all of a sudden they're probably focused on the profitability and everything going on in the P&L, ignoring the balance sheet completely because they can't read it or have someone communicate to
Right.
them what's going on. And now all of a sudden they think profitability equals cash flow. It doesn't.
No, I agree.
And they end up finding out the hard way, and it comes as a very rapid surprise where they're told they're making all this money, they got all this profit, and there's nothing in the bank.
Yeah,
and like, why is that happening? And it's so hard to understand.
Yeah. Cash flow, and you've already indicated, is more important than profitability. In my view. Cash flow is actually, profitability is great.
Yeah.
But if you don't have any cash flow, you've got a raft of issues.
Yeah, it's your blood supply and your oxygen.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And you've also, by your comments, you're spot on. There are so many people that are great engineers, they're great mechanics, they're good marketing people, but they don't have the financial understanding, right? Because they're not educated that way.
Yeah, and we were just talking about, before we turned the cameras on, we were talking about a law firm you're dealing with.
Correct.
They're coming out and like, I was saying to you, like, how does a law firm even fail? You're like, working capital.
Working capital, that's right. And again,
and the funding.
That's right.
24% or something?
That's right.
Rad.
So again, great solicitor, good at running cases and settling cases, but again, didn't understand
the financial
impact of
the lag.
Yeah. I'll give you another prime example of what I'm working on at the moment. I've got 3 bakeries that I'm working with at the moment. They went and borrowed about $300,000 to set up a manufacturing. So it's 3 bakeries. They wanted to centralise their manufacturing. Makes good sense from efficiency
Sounds
viewpoint.
good.
Went and borrowed $300,000 from a company called. How they get paid is they take 13% of your revenue. Now, if you think about that for 30 seconds, for every dollar you sell, not after cost, you are losing 13 cents of that. There is no way
straight out of your margin.
Yeah.
Wow. So your revenue requirement to actually survive, just to pay back the finance, is going to spike.
Correct. So you sell your product for $1, you're only receiving 87 cents.
So it's almost like the moment they sign that loan agreement, they're dead.
They're dead. There's no hope.
But they're not dead straight away.
No.
It's like I would describe that as radioactive. Yep. So it's like you expose yourself to something radioactive,
correct.
You won't notice it straight away.
Yeah.
But you're fucked.
Yeah.
Later on down the track.
Well, you'd never have the margin.
Yeah. We've seen it with clients. I've brought to you with your team where they've entered into factoring arrangements.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's not to say that factoring is bad, but they've misunderstood
the cost of it.
Yeah, the cost of it.
That's right.
And even just the economics and how it works and how to administer it and what its purpose is. So it's like they've put it's like the wrong medicine for the wrong disease. It's like, no, you don't need to factor. Actually, you need to figure out your receivables process so that you can grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Factoring is a good product when you're in a growth style phase. But you're right. If you don't collect your debtors, say in 90 days, generally there's a recourse, and that has a significant negative impact.
The price of it spikes.
Exactly right. Plus you've got the management fee, plus an interest. Directors, they see it as an instant cash input, right? So you can then So you sell your debtors, you get 80% of your debtor book, so that gives you an immediate cash impact. But then they don't understand the long-term consequences. I'm not saying it's a bad product; it's a good product, but there's just the implications of entering that into that style of contract.
Have you dealt with fraud before?
Unfortunately, I can tell you in the last 5 years, I've seen more fraud than ever.
Yeah, wow. What kind of stuff? Petty, sophisticated? What?
Some of it's been unsophisticated, but we've seen
desperation.
And
what does that look like? What kind of things do desperate people do?
I'll give you an example. One file I've got at the moment where effectively, so there was 2 elements to their business. They were obviously selling product to external parties, but occasionally parties would come in literally to the front counter and purchase the product, and they may pay via their credit card. Well, those proceeds were actually going into an individual's personal bank account.
All right.
It wasn't going into the company's bank account.
Right.
The other thing we've found is that the net debtors invoice would go out, the customer would pay via check, the invoice would then be voided out, and the check would then be endorsed over and paid into the individual's personal account.
Yeah.
It's fraud. Simple
Brilliant.
as that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah,
One of the classics I've seen is a company will enter into a factoring arrangement, and in order to
yes,
keep getting cash, they will just create invoices out of
yep,
thin air.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then the issue then becomes obviously verification.
Mm.
Now,
Mm.
obviously, a lot of factoring companies or debtor financing companies will then try and verify, and that's where again it gets more complicated.
Yeah.
And I've seen it where the person involved has had multiple mobile phones, and obviously we've taken the phone call and said yes,
Yep.
I'm this party.
And the financial records will be an
So
absolute show.
yeah, with schmozzle. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the other, and
That's
you've
a telltale sign.
telltale sign, correct. And you've actually then also indicated another when you're asking what do I see and what causes financial difficulties. It is the state of the books and records.
Yep.
Because the director just does not understand where financially the company is at. I'll
Yep.
give you another prime example. Leon and I were appointed through the courts to a company on Monday. We were talking to the director yesterday. Actually doesn't run a zero file. Everything is run through spreadsheets. Now, how can you run accurate books and
How big's the
records?
company?
It was turning over, shocking English, turning over approximately $8 million. Now, how can you run
On a spreadsheet? Yeah.
on a spreadsheet? How does that work?
I guess you could, but
Well,
probably not.
you'd have to be pretty good at spreadsheets. That's all
Well, you
I
could do
can
your
say.
planning on a spreadsheet, but you're not running
know,
your tax accounts on it.
No,
No,
in this day and
really
age,
shouldn't be.
with zero, MYOB, etc.,
What's
etc.,
the excuse for doing that?
we haven't got the excuse yet. So
Yeah.
we're only appointed to it in the last few days.
Yeah.
But that is
Okay.
absolutely
That's interesting.
concerning that someone is running it through a spreadsheet rather than an accounting package. The other thing we see also is that the accounting package then doesn't talk to other IT systems within the business.
Yep.
So therefore, you actually, again, are not getting a complete picture.
Yeah.
Right? You might have just the payroll records being actually recorded accurately, but the rest of the ledger is completely inaccurate. So you need to make sure you've got a fully integrated system. All the different systems need to be able to talk to each other and integrate. That's the other thing we see quite regularly, that the systems. And the other thing is also, the other thing we see is that the spouse tries to be the bookkeeper. They don't have the training. Again, you end up with inaccurate records, therefore you don't have timely and accurate information, and therefore decisions are made from something that's occurred back here, not with what's currently taking place. And it's also to a degree where I don't want to be critical of my industry because I am an accountant by trade. Accountants historically, in my view, are very good at the compliance. What they're not great at is the advisory piece, because first of all, they don't have the time. And then secondly, at times, the clients don't want to pay for that advisory piece. And therefore, they're only getting limited information and they're not receiving the expert advice that they need. So that's the other. And, and at times as accountants, we are busy and, you are snowed under. And therefore, the quicker you can get something done out the way, the better. And therefore, you're not providing the advice that the clients need.
And also, how effective can an accountant or someone in that position be if the figures that they're looking at are wrong?
Correct.
It's like you're in the middle of the desert. You've got a compass. You want to go north, but you've got a magnet next to it. You think it's going north. You can't tell because you can't shoot a bearing off anything. You're in the middle of the freaking Sahara. Things taking you west.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and that's what the financials are doing. If the bookkeeper's not, or whoever's running the books, are not dialed in, and
I agree.
We see that all
you and
the
I see
time.
It all the time.
I don't know why it is so hard to find a good bookkeeper. It is.
I think some directors don't want to pay for a bookkeeper.
There's that
element
to
it, and I think I've become more and more of an advocate for bookkeeping services. You need
100%.
You need a
All starts
qualified
there.
bookkeeper within your business, if it's 1 day, 2 days, 5 days a week, whatever you need, just to make sure your basic books and records are up to date.
Yeah.
And then you've got something to deal with your tax accountant or your other advisors, so they've at least got some base information to work with.
Okay, on that, if I was a company director and I'm not sure about, I'm not financially trained, I make widgets and I make awesome widgets. I'm trusting my bookkeeper to be doing the right thing. How do I verify that my bookkeeper's doing the right thing?
Look, that's a very good question. It's a hard question to answer because you're relying on the professionalism of that individual. I think, look, that's where, as a director, I think it's important you have some basic level of financial understanding. So you need to go and do some course. It doesn't need to be a degree by any stretch, just a basic course. So at least you interpret the financials. And that's also where, again, if you have an external accountant, if they look at the trial balance or the P&L and balance sheet, they should have an immediate feel if they believe it's accurate or inaccurate. But, general experience, look, we've formed a relationship with Institute of Chartered Bookkeepers, as you know, and that relationship has become very solid, and therefore, and we know the education they provide their members. So if we are asked for recommendation in relation to a bookkeeper, we will obviously turn to a member of that particular organisation. And as I said, a bookkeeper really, to me, is the linchpin from a financial viewpoint to assist accountants and the director with the information moving forward.
Yeah, I see it as a first line of defence.
It's a first line of defence, exactly.
It really is.
Yep, agreed.
And practically speaking, some of the things I've seen for directors in that position would actually be like, hey, do a read back. It's like, hey, bookkeeper, cool. Have you closed out the month?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Okay, cool.
Is the bank account reconciled?
Tell me about the financial situation I'm in.
Yep.
What do you see?
Yeah.
Just the facts. Right? Read the balance sheet back to me. What's it saying? Why?
And if they can't do that, then you know.
Correct.
Yeah.
You've
got a potential issue. I'm not saying you have an issue, but you have a potential issue.
No, but you see some classics. Like there's a client I'm dealing with at the moment. You open up their, I met them and they're worried about their bookkeeping state. Yep, cool. Put them onto a new bookkeeper. I get a screenshot on the phone they've sent to me. They've gotten access to the portal. All of a sudden, 3 years of unlodged GST and PLYJ. And they've flown under the radar. They haven't lodged it, so the ATO doesn't know it's there. It's like they're about to. And I'm like, that's what, we're going to be reaching out to one of your colleagues up in Sydney to be like, hey, the moment these are lodged, because the bookkeeper's got to lodge them, right? Then we're going to see the debt. Oh, by the way, like what should be one just tax account on the balance sheet, they have five of the same tax account. Why? So, hey, how do you want to read this? Does the tax office owe you money or do you owe them? Well, like, I'm pretty sure you owe them, right? But where are we even at? And then the moment you lodge that, hey, there's something coming down the pipe. And I describe that as like, that's the iceberg lurking out there. You're effectively the Titanic. You're cruising along thinking everything's fine. You got this pipeline of work. Yep, cool. It's like, no, there is an iceberg out there and you cannot even see it coming. But if we can see it, where is it? How deep? How far away is it? And all of a sudden we might just be able to navigate around it. Maybe we've got to lodge this stuff and hey, that means, we're going to enter into a payment plan or whatnot. Or hey, is it about actually, you lodge it, you realize it is too much. There has been some stuff go wrong. Cool. There might be some options through an administration to cut the debt down legally, and because that's actually what's given the size of the business, that's what's got to be done. So
I must say, and again, you've made a very good point. Again, I met with a potential client on Friday. Their external accountant told them not to lodge their BAS returns, right? And then I explained to them the potential personal liability on the director for the non-lodgement, and he was horrified. Right?
Yeah, because isn't it in Australia, if it's 90 days
3 months
after the due date, you're now liable,
you're now personally liable for that debt.
Yeah, so that means, correct me if I'm wrong, but let's say you like this client I'm talking about with their 3 years stuff, basically like everything that's 2 years, 9 months older, they're effectively going to be personally liable for. So even if the debt was too much for the business to handle, in theory, you could go into administration to cut that. But the administration is not going to be effective on all the stuff that you're personally liable for.
That's right. You're right.
it's not going to get rid of it. So you've got to get some sort of, if the business can't handle it, you'd be left with what, bankruptcy?
Yeah, you could be faced with bankruptcy. Now, assuming
Mate,
that, now you're obviously personally liable
there's a
for
lot.
PAYG and GST. It's not
Yes.
income tax, but you're right. If there's, that person, that director,
Mm.
unfortunately, will now be personally liable if the ATO decides to pursue them.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And we're seeing more and more of that, as you know.
Mm. Yeah, particularly off the back of COVID. It's one of the
Correct.
things I saw
Yeah.
where it's almost like during COVID, there's all this money that's been pumped
Yep,
into
agree.
businesses. And then, like, when was it? Like 2023, late 23, I think it was. It was October, November, and all of a sudden the ATO's
Yep.
attitude changed
Yep.
in an instant.
Mm.
And all of a sudden they started calling it in.
They did. And they're
Yeah.
continuing to call it in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, big ways.
We see it literally daily, if not weekly at the moment.
Mm. Mm.
And generally, they're always the single biggest creditor in any file that we deal with, any potential file.
Mm.
So yeah, it's changed remarkably. Now, in saying that, obviously there's a new piece of legislation that you and I have been working with, small business restructure, which has also helped for smaller businesses to restructure. But yeah, again, the attitude of the Australian Taxation Office has changed, and it's been well publicised on how much the debt has increased to the ATO in the last 4 or 5 years. So you can understand why they are trying to pursue that debt.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Because any other third-party lender or supplier would be doing the same thing.
Yeah, but then the knock-on effects of that.
Oh,
And I
significant.
think that's the scary part, where if the ATO is one of the largest creditors, you've effectively got these zombie businesses in the economy that are now being aggressively pursued by the ATO. And as they start to go down, then all of a sudden the employees and the creditors of those businesses are now impacted. And that's where you're going to see this ripple effect
Agree.
coming through. I think you start that with, not so strong residential and commercial builders.
Yeah. Look.
Yeah, certainly started there, and that's going to have a knock-on effect through their subcontractors and so on and so forth.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're seeing it. If you wanted to focus on two industries at the moment, it's building and construction. We're seeing a lot of work out, and hospitality because of the state of the economy.
Yeah.
People just haven't got the free cash flow to spend like they used to have, or they're just not willing to spend and utilize the credit card or other credit facilities they once had.
Yeah. Hospitality's also been impacted by a massive shift away from cash and onto paying by card.
Yep.
Off the back of COVID too.
Yeah, great.
And their margins have corrected.
They've shrunk because as we all know, food price has gone up, labour's gone up, so therefore, there's not the profitability there once was in the hospitality industry. Plus, you combine that with a reduction in turnover. The hospitality businesses I've dealt with and spoken to, they're telling me that people may not be purchasing the entree. They'll go for a main, probably not dessert. They might be ordering a glass of wine rather than a bottle of wine, or they're going for the cheaper bottle of wine, and therefore they're just not getting the margin they were once achieving.
Yeah. In your experience, you've been doing this a while, and Australia hasn't had a recession since.
No. Late 80s, early 90s when I joined the industry.
Yeah.
We went through the GFC and that was about it.
Yeah, GFC was a bit of a ripple.
It was a ripple, yeah. It wasn't a recession.
Standards,
yeah,
my God.
It wasn't a recession in the true sense of the word.
How does the current environment now, in early 2025, compare to other periods of time over your history?
So, put in perspective, I joined the industry, now I'm going to show my age, in 1993. It is the worst I've seen it. I can tell you categorically, for the number of new files we're receiving, the level of the debts, the lack of cash flow. So, I joined the industry at the back end of the recession, but if you compare it, as I say, I've been doing this for 30 years, it's the worst I've seen. And there's a number of factors that say that. You've got the instability, obviously what's happening in the Ukraine, still in the Middle East. We've got the back end of COVID, so you've got mental health issues. I've never seen the mental health issues that I've been dealing with, and you have been as well with what you do for the last couple of years. Even though interest rates have gone up, they've gone up a little bit now. Obviously, they're on the way back down. That had an impact. Labour prices have gone up. raw material prices have gone up. You've got all these different factors that have led to the state of the Australian economy. Yeah, now I'm not an economist, but I'll make an observation. My belief is the economy actually is being held up by government spending at the moment, not by private consumption. Now, I'm not an economist, but that's
No,
my observations of
agree,
what I'm seeing.
agree, agree.
And then you combine that with then, you know, the Australian Taxation Office then turning the screws and wanting their debt paid, which is completely fair enough, as I said earlier. That's just led to what we're seeing now. In saying that, if you look at the level of insolvencies during COVID, they dropped by about 55, 60%. The level of insolvencies right now have really come back to what I'll describe as a normal level. They might be slightly above a normal level, but they've come back. It's only because of what we got used to during COVID that people are now saying, or the media in particular are saying, well, look at the level of insolvencies. Well, they're probably not as bad as what, if you looked at, comparatively speaking, what they've been in the past.
Mm.
So, but there's all these different factors that have just led to where we are today. It's not one factor as such.
So it's certainly an interesting economic climate we're in.
It is.
That's for sure.
And I say I'm not an economist. Far from it.
It's fascinating though. Like
It is. Okay.
Australia's response to COVID, we basically printed, I don't know the exact stats off the top of my head, but I believe it was something like roughly 1/3 of our entire economy. We effectively printed the money in, it was, by issuing the loans and buying them back.
Yep.
Issue the bonds, buy the bonds back. It's money printing, quantitative easing. I remember hearing about it on news radio.
Yep.
Driving around during COVID, I was tuned into news radio waiting for us to go into lockdown. You hear this 6-week quantitative easing thing as an announcement by the RBA. And you're like, you have to go back to World War II to find anything close to that. And that even dwarfs it in size and speed. And you're like, now you wonder where the inflation comes from. And we're talking about rising prices. It's like, no, we've massively increased the money supply. And that money supply came through a injection into businesses, whether they wanted it or not. It was a massive financial shot in the arm. And we're now, in my opinion, effectively deleveraging.
Oh, I agree.
And returning to normal. And now you're finding out who the strong actually are.
That's right.
And it sucks for people who are caught up in it. But it's like that's actually needed.
Yeah,
in a healthy economy, you have to let free markets operate and bad businesses die.
There is always going to be a level of what I'll describe as cleansing.
Yeah.
It's not abnormal to have a level of insolvencies because some businesses and individuals just don't succeed, and therefore, it's part of the natural attrition, for want of a better word. You're just seeing a larger rate of it at the moment because of what occurred for that period of time during COVID where it just didn't occur.
Yeah.
And you're right, there were zombie companies, there were companies that should have been dealt with that weren't dealt with. They didn't have to be dealt with because of the change of legislation, plus
there was nearly 2 years that the ATO would effectively
let
you build up your debt and they'd just leave you alone. That's part of the policy. Okay, cool.
I agree. Right. So you're now seeing,
we're dealing with it.
You've seen the back end of that. I think also to a degree, it allowed people to become complacent with the ATO debt, so to speak. Because I thought, well, I've got away with it for the last couple of years. Do I really need to deal with it now? And all of a sudden, it's come home to roost. So people have to deal with it now.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that, and the implications of it too. Like, it blows people's mind when you do the math on your ATO debt. Hey, you've built up $100,000 worth of ATO debt. Oh, it doesn't seem that bad. Okay, well, what's your bottom line margin?
Yeah.
Because it's bottom line profit that's going to have to pay that back.
I agree.
Right, well, 10%. Okay, so 100 grand, you now need $1 million in revenue to pay that 100 grand back. And that's revenue on top of what you would normally do to sustain the business and grow it.
Correct.
So how does that factor in?
Yeah.
Now you've got $1 million. Oh, there was one we dealt with. You met them. $10 million in ATO debt, negative 2% margin.
That's right.
You're never going to pay it back.
No, it's never going to happen.
So, okay, we need yes, it's about the ATO debt, but we need to aggressively fix the margin.
Correct.
And in that case, we were able to get their labor efficiency
Yep.
up. And they were, by the time we disengaged, they were pumping 25, nearly 30%.
Yeah, which is just
Now,
incredible.
all of a sudden, $10 million is actually not so scary.
Yep.
You've got options, but -2, like, kill it now, and yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating what we've been through.
Yeah.
And the other observation I'll make, and it is a generalisation, but I think also I don't think we're as a race as resilient as what we were. Now, I'm not sure if that is a generalisation, but I think also with what's happened through COVID and the back end of it, I don't think we're, as I said, as resilient as historically we have been.
Mm.
I think COVID
as in we haven't been tested.
I think during COVID, people became more insular. This is my observations. I think people became more insular because we were locked, particularly in Victoria, we were locked down.
Oh, yeah.
So you had to become insular.
We most definitely were in Victoria.
So I think that had a massive impact on people's mental state. And then you've come back out the other side, and I don't think we are as resilient as what we used to be.
Yeah.
And I can tell you categorically, we deal probably every week with a mental health issue for a director or an employee within one of the companies we're dealing with, and I think possibly the other thing that's taking place is now people are more ready to talk about it, if that makes sense, compared to 10, 20 years ago, where it was more the, stiff upper lip, get on with it type scenario. Again, I think people are more willing to talk about their anxiety or their, or how they're feeling, and therefore as an industry, we've become more alert to it, and that makes our job harder. But on the other hand, you're actually helping people.
And on that, how do you find or navigate the balance between trying to get the best outcome for creditors, which is your primary mission,
which is that is our role, 100% right.
Yeah, versus what you were describing earlier is the emotional intelligence and trying to do what's right by the people, and even potentially by the people who put the creditors in this position. How do you try and navigate that balance?
That's difficult to navigate at times. It is very difficult to navigate, right? And I think you've got to strip it back to say, okay, is there a core business here that if we reconstruct that, so if we can get it back to the core business, then you're achieving an outcome for the director. And in addition to that, that should actually also provide a better outcome to the creditors, if that makes sense. So, it's a case of just understanding exactly if there is a core business you can deal with. If there is no core business, then you do have a bigger problem. Therefore, you do have to go into wind down mode, and again, do it in a respectful way. So therefore, the director and the senior manager involved don't feel like they have, let themselves down. You've got to and it's also a journey. So you've got to take them through that journey. So they've got to understand your decision-making process. They've got to understand the analysis you've undertaken so they can see how you've got to that position. You can't just walk into the room and say, this is what I think. You've got to explain to them how you got there, the methodology. And occasionally we make mistakes. We may not have it right. So therefore they go, well, have you thought about this, this and this? Or what about this, this? Oh, okay, good point. And you go away and then you reconsider your position.
So, which is one of the purposes about why there is a process and multiple meetings and there's time between these.
Exactly right. So it's a case of really, and getting all your facts. The last thing you should do, and we've all done it, I've done it, don't go off half-cocked, as they say, right? Get all your facts, understand it, speak to multiple people. Don't just speak to the director or the accountant. And I'm not saying this lightly, the things you learn from other people in the organisation, right? They have their observations. They may have been there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They've got their observations. And they say, well, what about this? Have you thought about this? It's amazing what you can learn by just talking to people within the business. Just stopping, having a chat. And they're generally willing to give you their views of the world.
Mm, mm,
Right, wrong, indifferent, negative, positive. You learn a lot from, and I'm a firm believer in this. You learn a lot from just talking to people,
mm,
but you've got to be willing to take the time to talk to people and hear what they've got to say and not just dismiss them.
mm,
You've just got to be willing to listen.
mm. I think that's why absolutely wise words in the vast majority of cases. Out of interest though, how does that apply if you're dealing with someone, particularly in a liquidation scenario, who may indeed have acted nefariously?
Look, that's when you still give them a level of respect,
Mm-hmm.
but then you say, well, no, we can't proceed, or no, this is the position. And you've probably got to be more assertive about it when that situation arises. But I think you've also, the way I enter the room on every occasion is I will give the person the opportunity. However, if they breach faith or they,
So if they're
lying, or if they say one thing and they do the opposite, then it goes to a point where you say, well, no, enough's enough.
mm.
Now, I hate it when that occurs, right? It absolutely internally really impacts me.
Do you find it rare generally that occurs?
Yeah,
Or?
generally, generalization, generally 80-90% of people are decent people.
Mm.
And they could be embarrassed, upset by the situation. The last thing you do is make them feel embarrassed, okay? You treat them with respect, you understand, and therefore they'll generally open up to you. Now, some people don't.
Mm.
Some people don't trust me from the moment I walk through the front door, and I can understand that, right? I get where they're coming from. But on the other hand, the way we do it is we're here, if we can, we are here to help you, as long as you want to be helped.
Yeah.
Now, generally people will, as you know, for the experiences we've had together, people generally want to be helped, but some people don't. They just don't. They're burnt out, they've become bitter with what's occurred. There are other pressures outside of the business, that you just not aware of and you can't deal with.
And that's such a tough call too.
It is a
Like
tough call.
there was one client that we were dealing with in late 2023, 2024. The two directors there, they built a massive business, negative gross profit margin though, trying to turn the economics around, get into the wrong kind of financing. Looking at it from the outside, according to the figures, you're like, hey, actually, if we do this and this and this, hey, this might be really viable. Let's try the administration and try. But it's like at the end of the day, no, it's like at the end of the day, the directors were done.
Yeah, they were done.
They left it too late.
Yep.
And yeah, they were worn out. And
that can occur.
They're actually now working on the tools and better for it.
So you go.
Yeah, they got their life back.
Yeah, which is important.
Hugely important.
Yeah,
hugely important.
You've got to have, there is a point occasionally where you just can't fix it. And the individual is better then to become an employee, become a wage and salary earner again. It doesn't mean they can't recommence at some point down the track. No, it doesn't. They're not.
Depending on what.
Yeah.
Perhaps on why and so on and so
forth.
Because there can be certain circumstances where it turns criminal, yeah?
Yeah.
Very exceptional.
It can do, but that's very exceptional. I've had, very rarely have I seen that in 30 years. Now, I could have just been very lucky with the people I've dealt with, but I've very rarely seen that. It's only been a couple of occasions. I've had one where it was a Ponzi scheme, literally, and unfortunately, the director has been charged and spending some time.
Speaking of criminality, weren't you were talking to me about some sort of AFP case one time? I don't know if you can talk about it.
At the moment.
You're busting open safes and things like that in the back end.
Yeah.
Some Chinese crypto.
So this company was the largest organisation of foreign currency translation in Australia at one point in time, and it wasn't part of obviously the big four banks.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, we're still working with the AFP. They've got, and unfortunately, the director and a couple other people are on charges. So the AFP are actually in control of the books and records. We don't have them.
Okay.
We are told
It's
there's
an interesting bookkeeper.
exactly. We are told we've potentially got about $20 million of cryptocurrency sitting somewhere,
Okay, somewhere.
but
Yeah.
we can't get our hands on the wallets at this
Yeah,
stage.
yeah.
So that investigation is continuing. So yeah, that's
Tell them it's in the Bahamas and you need a field visit. Yeah.
it's I can only hope, but yeah, that's an interesting matter, that one, and it's going to go for a while yet.
So yeah, we're getting this all edited through a church where I got baptized just
That's
recently
fantastic.
in Texas. So they have a studio out back
Yeah.
that they run podcasts out of. They have a production company linked up with the church. It's just this tiny little show you wouldn't even know in Texas there. This place out of Dallas called Denton. And yeah, the profits from the production company fund all their outreach programs for single mums and
so
domestic
that's
violence,
awesome.
all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's a pretty cool little link up that
So
way.
did you say you only recently baptized?
Yeah. I was in Texas in just in November. Got myself baptized there. Yeah.
Can I ask why? No, I've been baptized. I'm not.
Oh, a big part for me was a few reasons, but the main one, like you're aware of the situation, but when my wife got diagnosed with what could have been terminal, and to go through that process with the bone marrow transplant and that entire thing, that's still going on now. She had the transplant early 2019, but just to go through that, you can't not see God's work at place, and the miracles along the way. And for me, it was a personal decision to just acknowledge that.
Yeah, well done. I'm impressed.
Yeah, so that there's something out there just in my own way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. It was really cool experience.
Yeah,
really
that's
cool
great.
experience.
Only because vast majority of people, if they're baptized when they wouldn't even know they're being baptized.
Yeah, and that's why it's something that I wanted to do as an adult.
Yeah,
I already was.
respect that. No.
Yeah. My mum was training to be a nun before she met Dad.
Oh, was she?
Yeah, in Germany. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Lutheran or
Catholic?
Catholic?
Well, I'm gonna say Lutheran.
I would have thought Lutheran being German, but
Well, so my grandparents in Germany one was Catholic, one was Protestant,
right.
which is like a big no-no.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, but my mum's village in Germany. So my great-grandfather was mayor of the village. He was Catholic, so it's a predominantly Catholic region in Germany. That's
whereabouts?
Closer to Stuttgart.
Yeah,
Black
Stuttgart.
Forest, sort of southwest.
I love Black Forest.
Yeah, beautiful the country on the Neckar River that flows through. It's like Heidelberg, Castle Road. You drive up that, there's just castle.
Oh, it's a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah. But big Catholic presence there, and during the war, like you go back to my mum's village, and they actually protected the Jewish population there. So you don't hear about it in Germany,
No.
but yeah, you go to my mum's village, top of the town. There's a Jewish cemetery, completely untouched. And it was the Jews were protected by the townspeople. They would not give them up until the Gestapo came in and took them in the middle of the night, and they took my great-grandfather because he was mayor of the village, and my grandmother. So my grandmother had the number, but they were liberated by Americans out of a French concentration camp as political prisoners. Meanwhile, my grandfather's in Stalingrad. He was on the last evacuation out of Stalingrad.
Oh wow!
Yeah, everyone else was killed or captured, and he's in the Wehrmacht, and he's somewhere in frickin' Stalingrad. He's met some Russian. It must have been alone. They've exchanged addresses. He's helped this guy out. I don't know if he spoke German or not. My grandfather definitely didn't speak Russian. He's helped this guy out. They've exchanged addresses. And my auntie in Germany has these 3 letters between my great-grandfather and this Russian soldier after the war. It's be like, hey, you make it out of this. Ain't this situation fucked? Yeah. Hey, you make it out of this. Send me a letter. And they both survived.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Would have got them both shot on the spot. But, these things shine through sometimes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's one of the things that I find interesting about what you do and how you do it. As I said, compared to other liquidators, that I've certainly come
Mm.
across. Not that they're necessarily bad people, but
No, they're not bad people.
the
They
way
just
that
do it
you,
differently.
the way that you try and find that balance.
Mm.
Because if you can identify someone who's in a bad situation, but they've done it for whatever reason, but morally, ethically, they're, I suppose legally, they may have legally, financially, fucked up. Okay, cool. But hey, morally, ethically, did they try to do that? Are they trying to do the right thing? Do they want to get better?
Yeah.
Are they so on and so forth? So okay, cool. There's options to help them. But on that subject, something
Sure.
I'd really like to explore is, financial stress
Yep.
has very real ramifications.
Oh, absolutely.
Drug abuse, domestic violence, even up to suicide.
Yep.
For someone listening to this who, I suppose, even on the personal side, but more thinking about it from a business, a business owner who may be losing sleep at night, really worried about what they've built and feel like they can't get out of it. They might feel like there's no options. What do I do? Who do I call? What would you say to someone in that situation?
Well, first of all, obviously, go and speak to your accountant and your lawyer in the first instance. Then once you've sat down with them, obviously, a professional like myself would be happy to sit down on no obligation basis with them, go through it, and just try and understand what the underlying concerns are. To state the obvious, obviously, the quicker you do that, the better. But as you could well appreciate, at times people can be embarrassed or they're in denial. So it's a case of then trying to induce them, for want of a better word, just sit down and and it's funny, once you sit down with someone and they start explaining the situation, they have a tendency then to open up, and then you can help them. But you've got to get them to the table. And that's why one of the things we do is we will meet, as you know, anyone, anywhere. Like, I have met people in KFC stores, McDonald's stores, on the side of the road. About a month and a half ago, I was helping someone out with my team lead over in Perth. We literally had the meeting, and I'm not joking, on the bonnet of her car in the middle of the bush, where we met the director to make him comfortable, right? Because that's where he was working. So we drove about an hour and a half south of Perth, and we met him at that location. We literally had the meeting on the bonnet of that director's, my staff's car, but we met the director and we literally had the meeting on the bonnet of her car. So it's all about making people comfortable. It's all about explaining to them the options they've got available to them, and it's not all doom and gloom, and therefore giving them that light at the end of the day. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. But then people have to be willing to accept the advice, and also willing to receive the advice. And it's really, that first meeting is probably the hardest thing to achieve. So the accountant may come to us and send the balance sheet and the profit and loss, but then if they can't get the director to meet with us, it's completely pointless.
And if someone is in a position and it turns like their accountant or their bookkeeper is, unfortunately, I've seen that too, where their accountant or bookkeeper is just not all that helpful and not all that responsive. There's certainly nothing wrong with a company director coming directly to a firm like yours.
No,
hey,
of course not.
I'm worried about my situation.
Yep.
Can you take a look at it?
And that's becoming more and more common. We are getting a lot of direct referrals through the internet now. So we run Google ads and that sort of thing, and we actually are seeing more inquiries from directors. So they obviously, sitting in front of their computer at night.
And just to be clear, so I know I've had this concern raised from clients in the past where they're in a situation and they want to get it looked at. Is there any legal liability back to the director for them in just coming and having that initial discussion with you and the team to be like, hey, here are my financials, here's the facts, here's what I think's happening. What are my options? You know, is there any practical downside to that they need to be aware of, or anything?
There's actually more upside than downside, because under the Corporations Act, by seeking professional advice, you're actually mitigating the risk. So
That was my understanding.
a defence under the Corporations Act. If the worst case scenario, the company's liquidated, that is actually a defence by seeking professional advice.
Yeah, and the earlier you do
earlier
that,
better.
the more robust that
That's
defence
right.
is.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So no, it's only a positive by seeking that advice. But again, the person has to be comfortable, and they have to ensure that, you know, get over that level of potential embarrassment because of the situation they find themselves in.
Now, with that, not all liquidators are the same. And my understanding is when it comes to putting a company into administration, I know a small business restructure is a little bit different.
It is slightly different.
But either going into liquidation or administration, I've sometimes described it as almost like chemotherapy. It's like once you start, you can't go back.
Well,
you sign that piece of paper.
Right,
okay, they're in control. So therefore, you better know who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
What should people, particularly company directors, be looking for in a liquidator when they're meeting with these people? What questions should they be asking for, and perhaps even temperaments, personalities? Like, what's the good and the bad?
Yeah, look, so every liquidator is different, right? Because of their personality type, the way they've educated, probably the market they're in. It's just a case of, you've got to be, as the director, you've got to be comfortable that you can communicate with them, and you've got that level of rapport. That's probably the first thing. Second thing is also, I think, have a potential liquidator or administrator that understands the business. For example, making sure, for example, my firm, we work with small to medium-sized businesses. So therefore, they're coming to us because they're in that marketplace. You know, very rarely do we work with ASX listed companies, and I don't confess to be able to do that. So there's other firms that are set up better, and they'll handle it more efficiently than my practice, for example. So it's a bit of a fit for purpose type scenario. By all means, ask them questions about how they would conduct the process. What does it entail? Get them to walk you through the timelines, how it works, and explain the potential consequences, and also the potential options. So therefore, when it comes to the end of the day, they know, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that option was available. And I think the other important issue is, you'll need more than one meeting. Do not think one meeting will solve all the problems or give you all the answers. It just won't, because you'll go away, the director will think of something, or they'll talk to someone and go, oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. You'll have numerous meetings before you, and it doesn't matter if it's a small job to a medium to a large job, you will need multiple meetings.
A bit like a health issue, go and get a second opinion.
Absolutely, and go and get a second opinion. It's not uncommon for the director to come in, and he or she will go and seek a second or a third opinion, right? Don't have a problem with that. Completely respect that, because it's a big decision to make. So you need to make sure you're comfortable with the parties, right? The other thing, obviously, is to understand how the fees get paid, how that works, and just so there's no surprises at the end of the day. The other thing is, if you need something in writing, ask for it. The other thing we've started doing is providing a point form summary of the process. So therefore, the person can take it away, consider it, think about it, and then from there can be another raft of questions, because they've gone away and thought about it. They may have spoken to a trusted advisor or a family member, and then they come back with more questions, which absolutely fair enough. It's a big decision to make. You know, probably also, liquidators can be members of various professional organisations. Just make sure that, again, they're generally a member of, there's a couple of professional organisations, see if they're members of those, because that also dictates the way they have to conduct themselves to a degree, if you're a member of those. So they have certain code of conduct, code of ethics on what you have to comply with.
Yep, fair enough. And what about the other side of the equation?
Mm-hmm.
If you're someone who is owed money,
Yep.
there's been a lot of stories in the news recently with builders going
Mm-hmm.
under, and family units left with hundreds of thousands of dollars, of exposure.
Yep.
In situations like this, or it definitely happens in businesses where they're supplying into companies. What about from a creditor perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way for creditors to most effectively engage with a liquidator in the process if they're involved in that? Some do's, some don'ts, things to ask for.
Of course, a creditor shouldn't be engaged in the process. At the end of the day, once we're appointed, we act for the creditors at the end of the day. So they have rights, and they should ask the questions, and they should understand what happened and why. And there are also reports that are then issued by liquidators. Obviously, read those reports and ask any questions if they need any gaps filled in. On the other hand, because of our commercial experience, we can also assist creditors with their terms and conditions, credit applications. Can they take security over certain assets? So we can actually advise also creditors on what they can do when they're commercially dealing with their customers to better secure their positions, if at all possible.
And is that able to be done only during a liquidation or administration process, or can that even be done proactively?
No, that can be done proactively outside. So once we're appointed, we can't give advice to creditors with respect on how they can secure their debt. But my observation is in relation to if you are a supplier to customers and you need some advice, or if you want to secure your position, because of our experience, we can give you advice with respect to that on how to better secure your position.
Yeah, best defense is a good offense.
Correct, exactly right.
Yeah.
And then again, if you're not comfortable with that, you don't have to take our advice. You don't have to, draw up security interests, etc., etc. But at least you understand again what options are available to you.
Yeah, great. Wrapping it up, couple of things.
Sure.
So if you had God mode here in the Australian, you are the judge, jury, and executioner. You are the grand dictator of Australia, and it was all up to you, and everyone obeyed. What would you change about the current situation in Australia?
You're talking about insolvency legislation?
Yes, within your industry, what would you change and why?
Sure. A couple of things. Small business restructure legislation, as you know, is a great piece of legislation to restructure companies with total debts of less than $1 million. I would actually increase that threshold to start with. I'd probably increase it to $2 million. The other thing is it's rigid in what you can offer creditors. It should actually provide some variability. So if creditors aren't happy with the estimated return, the ability to revise that. Otherwise, if it can just fail then and there, which I don't like. The other thing is through the small business restructure process, you can't disclaim a contract or get a company out of a non-profitable contract, which you can do through the voluntary administration process. So I would import a section, because then in my view, it is a real restructure type piece of
proper restructure.
It's proper restructure. So they're the couple of things I would do with SPRs. With voluntary administrations and deed of company arrangements, what I'd look to do there is, as you know, they go for 25 business days. You can either increase the period through an application to court or adjourning the meeting. I think the administrator should have the ability to increase that time period if required, but they can't just do it, off the top of their head. You need to be able to justify that position, and you might need some sort of safeguard to make sure it's not just done for the wrong reasons. But I would give that flexibility rather than making an application to court. So there are a couple of changes I would make to those two pieces of legislation. As you know, voluntary administration process is it's fairly rigid. I think you could make it at times more flexible. The other thing, I think, if you want to restructure and end up in a deed of company arrangement, I think one of the issues with that is that the company maintains a position of being externally controlled in its company search, and therefore it makes it very difficult then for the company to gain credit from suppliers. So I think we need to look at how, once a business has been restructured, how we can better assist it to gain credit terms again, because it's great to restructure it, but then it may have issues going forward because of a lack of working capital, or suppliers put it on a COD, put the company on a COD basis, which then again can create issues. So I think we need to look at that as well. And I certainly don't have the answer there, because as you would well appreciate, financial institutions are reluctant to lend money to companies that have been through a restructure process. And I think we need to look at how
Particularly insurers.
Exactly right. So I think we need to look at post-administration process, what assistance can be provided. When I say assistance, I don't mean free handouts or anything like that, but I think we need to educate the financial institutions and how they could fund a business as it comes out the other side to help it succeed and grow after it's been through the restructure process.
Cool. Knowing what you know now, what would you have communicated to your younger self, or what wisdom would you pass on to someone just entering the industry?
That's a very good question. What would I do differently? I think I think I wish I had learnt more about HR type issues, understanding people's psychology and their emotional intelligence. I've had to learn that on the fly on the way through. I think our education system also, particularly undergraduate degrees, I don't think it prepares students for the real world and what takes place. And I think at times they probably need some practical experience as part of the uni degree, not just go in there, do your 3 years, and then just hit the world. I think you need to actually, during that period of time, do some practical placements, as they do probably in the medical industry and other industries. And therefore you understand the transition between being a student to being in the workforce and what's required. Probably the other thing for myself personally, in hindsight, I wish I'd done probably a combination of business and law. Because of insolvency, there's a lot of a law element to it. And I wish I'd studied probably a bit of law as well. So the HR element, the law element, and then finally the marketing element. So I'm not knocking the degree I've got, but it was a Bachelor of Business, major in accounting. It was very narrow. Now I went on and then went and did an MBA, which I think helped me broaden my academic horizons, and that helped me. But again, when I went and did my MBA, I had already had 10 years experience. A lot of people these days go and do an undergraduate and then go straight into a master's. I don't understand that. I think that you should be required to go and get a level of practical experience before you go and do a master's degree. And you're laughing at me, so I'm not sure if you're agreeing or disagreeing.
Oh, it's great for the unis. Masters used to be executive training, but you can go from a graduate never having a job and go straight to a master's.
I don't understand
that
it.
about.
And now I may be showing how old I am. When I came out of uni, if someone went and said they were doing their masters, I was like, whoa, you've got practical experience. You're at the top of your game, so to speak. And also you're committed to improving yourself by going to do your masters. Now it just seems to be a case, as soon as you do your undergraduate, you go and do your masters. So you say you've got a masters. You don't truly have I think you need to have that practical experience before you do other postgraduate studies. Anyway, I've just got on my high horse about the education system.
Yeah, so that falls into the God mode. Go and fix education while you're at it. Just pen is mightier than the sword. Wrapping it up, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Who else should I talk to?
I would encourage you to I think I would encourage you to talk to a lawyer or a solicitor to get their take on things. I think the other thing is, I think you should probably talk to a HR consultant, because everything we do these days has a human element to it. And probably also, as a third one, is understand the marketing element. For businesses to grow, they have to have some form of marketing and BD. Again, I was never trained to go and do the BD. I learnt by making mistakes. And I think once again, that's where I don't think it's, our degrees are broad enough. So there's three different styles of vocations I would be talking to as part of your series.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
No,
Cool.
thank you. Appreciate your time.
Steve Dixon, thank you so much for your time, mate. It's
Thanks,
been,
David. It means a
been
lot to me
illuminating.
personally.
It's
Thank
awesome.
you. I hope I haven't bored anyone, but thank you for the opportunity. It really means a hell of a lot to me.
No,
So
appreciate
thank you
it.
so much. I really do.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.